We need to talk about our planet and our business and figure out how we can be able to bring those two together and make sure we are focused on people, planet, and profit at the same time. This event is brought to you by the WWF, the World Wildlife Foundation. I'm honored today to have a panel of fantastic guests as we talk through what it is we are discussing. I'm going to introduce them one by one as we go, and then we will get into an introduction by Karen, who is the head of the organization that is bringing this event together, and then we can get into our program. So, right next to me here is Mr. Val Shah. He's the Kepcha Foundation trustee and chairman of Bidco Africa. Lots of questions for you in terms of industrialization and the impact that's having on our planet. Then we have Karen Boomsma, and she is the one who's been running a lot of sustainable innovations, and she's the director of the Sustainable Inclusive Business Conversation. She's on to put these events together. I have been part of this for 5-6 years now. It's fantastic to see how much it's grown. Next to her is Mr. Isaac Wondo. He's a board chair of WWF Kenya, the chairman of NCBA. It's great to have you. It's nice to be in the middle over there. I see banners right behind you. It's really great. And right next to him is Mr. Yes, Rokia Anoda, the head of sustainable and community engagement for Kenya Brewers Limited. We still have a conversation about bottles, and see how we can think through what are we going to do about plastic versus glass. The very end is Julian, Kenyan hip hop artist and recycling entrepreneur. Indeed, it's true. Emily is going to be joining us online. I believe she's going to be our virtual panelist, and we have questions for all of you as we continue to converse about what sustainable, inclusive business looks like. Karen.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. We'd like to do a short introduction. We are hosted by the Kenyan Private Sector Alliance. We run an organization called Sustainable and Inclusive Business. And I'm very happy to be here today with private sector members, as well as WWF. And the main reason for that is that I think it shows that we are finally at a stage where we think whether you are an environmental organization or you are a business, we all have the same responsibility. It's not WWF that is going to solve environmental issues. They have shown us why it's important to talk about this and why we have the responsibility. But we are now in 2020 ready to actually talk together and make a plan on how we're going to do that. It's really time that we rethink our position and our role, because we're just part of nature. We're all one. We're one people, and people influence the planet. People are using nature. Without nature, there's no business. There's no medication. There is no product. There is nothing. So we have to live in harmony with nature. We should only have a positive impact on nature, because then nature has a positive impact on us. This is not a nice thing to do anymore. This is urgent, and we really need to include it in how we do what we do. Whether you're running a business online, whether you have a big factory, it's not about the nice things you do on the side. It's about the impact of your action. So I would urge everyone, just look at your own impact every day. And I'm also not a saint. We were just talking about masks and disposables. So we all have our challenges to really change and think of all our actions and the impact it has on our planet. And for each business, that's different. But to have a green business DNA, that should be the new norm. And then we can build back better. So thank you all for being here. I'm very pleased that we are in one space. We're not different organizations anymore. We're all sharing the same responsibility. And we need to make sure that we thrive and that the planet can thrive. It's not about growth. It's not about one is doing better than the other. It's about thriving as a planet and as we are part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. That's a powerful conversation. No one expected the COVID pandemic to happen, and we've all done our best to be able to live in a successful manner under the circumstances. But it's true, masks, gloves, PPEs, and everything else having a real challenge. So we're going to talk about that in depth. But before we go on to our 5-minute screening, I'll also ask Mr. Isaac Wondo, the board chair of WWF, and the Kenya chairman of the NCBA, to give us a few words as to why this is important.
I think that I'll paraphrase it for us to think about from a broader perspective that as human beings we are very, very destructive, and we are destroying a lot of the things which technically come free to us from nature. And if we continue in this way, we will probably not be able to gift very much to our children and our grandchildren and our grandchildren's children. And I think that for me, I think that we've come to a tipping point, a point to which we can no longer take nature for granted, and we basically have to begin transforming ourselves and changing the way we interact with nature for the benefit of all humanity.
The world, White Fund for Nature, has seen a great degradation in everything, whether it is coral reefs or animals or land degradation. And now that we have a pandemic, we saw a little bit of a resurgence of all of these creatures back into the world. So we're going to talk about how the less humans get involved with the world, the more things seem to work. Things seem to work. Now we can improve that situation. But right now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to our next part before we start talking to our panelists in depth. You're going to watch a 5-minute version of the film from the Our Planet website, but it's also on Netflix. It was done in partnership with Netflix and David Attenborough, and it's a fabulous thing. You should watch it. I definitely watched it the second time last night. So let's do this for 5 minutes and then come back and talk about what you are about to see.
Welcome to the Anthropocene, the age of humans. We are now the dominant force of change on the planet.
Nature once determined how we survive. Now we determine how nature survives.
Three-quarters of the land surface and 2/3 of the ocean are impacted by our activities. In the summer, there is 40% less Arctic sea ice cover than there was in 1980. Almost half of our planet's forests have been felled for their timber and to make space for ourselves and our livestock. And at sea, our extensive overfishing is leading to the collapse of key fish stocks.
The cod stocks crashed back home in Newfoundland, where I was from. And, thousands of people thrown out of work, boats beached, canneries emptied. And that was the real wake-up call. That's where I began to understand that there'll be no jobs on a dead planet.
The destruction of our natural world is already costing us trillions of dollars every year. Suddenly, the costs of the age of humans are outweighing the benefits.
We are at risk of entering a danger zone where we could trigger irreversible and self-amplifying change which could push the whole planet ultimately away from the desired equilibrium. We are at risk of destabilizing the whole planet.
We have just 10 years to drastically alter our path before it will be too late to avoid catastrophic changes to our planet.
We need revolutionary speed, right? We need a green revolution, and it needs to happen at the scale and at the speed of the digital and internet and mobile revolution.
And what drove the speed and scale of these revolutions? Business. The same force that powered the last period of global change can also power the next.
The business sector has no option but to be a force for change.
Successful businesses will embrace the clean technologies that now exist.
Are we going to run out of wind and sunshine in Texas before we run out of fossil fuels? I'm betting on wind and solar. First and foremost, I'm a businessman, and the original decision was it was a business decision.
New ideas and land management strategies will help us protect our biodiversity and feed more people with less land. The health of the ocean is critical to the way our planet operates. Future businesses will respect it as a resource that belongs to all of us. only taking what it can naturally replace. Next generation businesses will design their product lines to fit within circular economies.
Waste from one process becomes food for the next. Waste is just a resource in the wrong place. That's even true for carbon dioxide. It's true for plastics. It's true for everything that we think we're throwing away. There is no away. And so we need to create economies that actually have infrastructure that enable that circular design.
If you ask millennials, what is the purpose of business? 47% said some version of the purpose of business is to improve society and protect the environment. This is a fundamental sea change in the way an entire generation thinks about business. It's going to mean if you want to attract the top talent and retain them, if you want to win over millennial customers and attract the $30 trillion of capital that's currently being given to millennials by the baby boomer generation, you're going to have a narrative around how your products are sustainable and healthy.
Sustainability is now the only business plan.
I think that in the future, when we look back, there will be two types of companies. Companies that got it and companies that didn't get it. I know which segment I'd like to belong to.
The only viable future is one in which business innovates to demand less of our world. In that future, the wild will recover. We can restore the balance of nature, fix the relationship between our planet and our business, and change the way we live on our planet for the better. Forever.
That is a short 5 to 7 minute clip of what is essentially a massively impactful video movie that's been on Netflix for the last 3.5 months. It was supported by WWF and also put together by Silverback Films. And it was about the essence of our planet, the economy, and the impact that I'm assuming all of us have watched. Starting with Juliani at the back over there. Just when you watched it, what came to mind? What did you think? What was your first impression?
I mean, overall, Konacheki, the animal kingdom is about men trying to impress females, the food. You know, and like that's the only thing in the whole cycle. But deep down, yani, what you see, and I even wrote something down, like one of the quotes in the thing, in Asama, the rainforest diversity depends on no one species gaining the upper hand. And it felt like the human encroachment and human curiosity, which led all of us to be here, is the exact thing that, of course, taking us back. So the human curiosity about always challenging the limits and trying to figure out the way forward. You create vehicles so that you can move faster, aeroplanes so that you can get there faster, so that you can go up faster. Is the same thing that actually causing us more harm. So we just need, there's nothing wrong with that. We just need to be a little bit intentional. So that's what I got from the whole film.
So it's almost like you're saying you're taking 2 steps forward, 5 steps back.
Yeah, because umenipata wafu gari sana try kusema kile acha nipumzike. But it's like so the solutions business provides, of course, they solve one problem at the same time create 5 more.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a very good summary.
Yeah.
Anola.
A couple of things. A shock. And I say shock because when we talk about the moon, and that was one of the greatest achievements, in the last 50 years. And then in the same breath, you're saying, as much as we've done this amazing thing and sent man to the moon, but as humans here on Earth, the destruction that we have done in just 50 years is shocking. So for me, it was shocked because sometimes I think there's a lot of awareness around the destruction to the environment and what's going on. But I think when you put it into context like that, it sort of brings it all in. And then it sort of makes the case that much more urgent. Because when you look at the next 50 years, we're all hoping to be here 50 years and leave a better world for our children. But I mean, that's what we've done in 50 years.
I think it's simple. When we had everything in abundance, we didn't take care of it because we thought, hey, this is available. There's plenty, and then we can do whatever. and then we had very few humans. And now we've got more humans and less abundance in nature. And I think it's important that we take extreme ownership right now.
Take extreme ownership right now.
Yes, responsibility and ownership to say, it's my job, it's my business, it's my thing. Not as a company, not as a business, but as an individual. If every individual across the planet, 7.4 billion, take responsibility, we sort it out, and we say we won't deplete it, we can solve it.
Karen, you've watched this many times. Still, what is the thing? What's the impression that you leave with when you watch it?
I see there's this big disconnection between us and resources, between us and nature. Even amongst each other, there's quite a big disconnect. And I find that quite alarming. And I think we need to restore that connection, that we are all in the same web. Beautiful, beautiful biodiversity web. And we are just part of it. We are one species in that whole. So I think we need to change the role we play and really bring that connection back. If this is what I do, what are the consequences on the other end? And you see now that nature will restore. It's us that keep on destructing it. So we can do it, and we have the ability. It's also we have to be able to make a mind shift, or have a mind shift that really allows us to change systems. We cannot continue with old values, changing something that's completely different. So if money is going to be the lead as the only value we put on everything, then we're not going to make it.
Let's close this, Mr. Munda. Before we start the panel conversation, WWF put this together and did a phenomenal job of telling us where our planet is. Why?
I think it's really in recognition that the human being is a very destructive animal. And I say that with all seriousness because we are part of species. And if you look at all destruction taking place in the world, it's really because of us. And I think we recognize that it is only us who can change the direction of the planet and humanity in total and all species. Reality is if we do nothing about it, then we will have probably a lot to pay for it before too long. So we must define the agenda which will allow us to bend the curve for the destruction we have created.
So let's talk about that now specifically as we get into our panel discussion. Over the next 50 minutes, we're going to be addressing all the parts we play. We have an industrialist in the building. We've got a corporate company that has been the leader in so many ways, in not just Kenya, but East Africa, in beverages. We've got a hip-hop artist and activist there. We've got an environmentalist in Kenya, and all that she's doing to connect businesses and the environment. Then we've got WWF, which is almost like the finger that is on the pulse of the heart of the planet. But we have people who are watching this and listening, who are consumers of all these products, who live in these lands, who, as Karen said, have isolated themselves from nature. We live in cities. We don't see monkeys, we don't see zebras, we don't see trees. They're those distant things we see on TV. And so my question is...
And we have a banker too.
And yeah, that's fine. Yes. And my question then becomes, what is the incentive as an industrialist to do better for the world? And how does that change the metrics of what you measure?
I think it's very simple. Responsible business, being environmental friendly, being sustainable makes sense in the global perspective. It also makes you sense because actually it reduces your cost of doing business. And this is where, if it's done sensibly, everybody can reduce the cost of doing business and therefore give more competitive products out there. So it's not just that I have to do this, it's a wish to. And you say, I wish to do this, and we align ourselves in terms of mind, body, and soul and say, let's go do it because this is what we want to do. And this is the way we will do it in. So rather than saying that, because of government regulation or whatever, you've got to do this, it should be more from inspiration within to say, I wish to do this, and this is how we will operate, and therefore we won't mess around. And the same way, we want our consumers out there to make sure that they don't dispose of various things in the environment and destroy it. Yeah. So I think it's responsibility on all fronts. But we take responsibility as a company, and we do it because we wish to be environment friendly. We wish to make sure we operate at a standard that we we inspire other people. But at the same time, I think it's also saying, let's create that awareness amongst our consumers to say, this can be done in this manner, this can be recycled, and therefore there's a much better way of doing things.
To that question of getting your consumers to understand and appreciate the change that is required, how do you change customer behavior when we're used to our plastic oil bottles from Bidco,
yes,
or our plastic containers for bread or whatever it is? How do we change that culture?
I think a lot of us give plastics a very bad name. It's not the plastic that's a bad name, it's the consumer who uses it. We can recycle it 10 times, 12 times. And we can reuse it is far better than anything else today. So when you look at it from a responsible perspective, what we need to tell people is, do not throw it in the environment, go and recycle it and put it in a bin and make sure that it gets recycled, because it's a fantastic resource. And I think that's important. So that awareness is important. But again, it's happening in a lot of third world countries. Is it really happening in the first world countries? Is a question mark. The other thing is, I can't do it alone. And this is where we come in as a whole group to say, I do it, but then I need everybody in the ecosystem, every company doing it, and therefore everybody in the country doing it. And that's where we bring in regulations. The government needs to come in with saying, we've got these regulations, you can't throw this away in the environment, sort that out, and companies also abide by it. So there are two-pronged approaches. One is the stick and one is the inspiration. You work on two prongs.
Carrot stick situation. Julian, on the ground.
Buda unanipata every time nirusha tu. Sasa at least nakupima.
On the ground. Do people see the value of recycling?
I think they have to connect their livelihood and their everyday life to recycling. They have to see the effect. So we have done a bad job in communicating that. Yes. Communicating the connection between that plastic and to their livelihood and how their school fees and everything will be paid. But at the same time, you have to realize that you're dealing with an individual who they live in a surrounding which there is no ownership in the first place. Because the way they left from Ushago to Nairobi wasn't from a place of, I'm owning this place that I'm living. I'm actually on a transit. So somebody who lives in Dandora is on a transit to Kilimani. Mtoke Kilimani is on a transit to Tunda. Unless they own the nini. So we're dealing with people who have a certain relationship. And we have to connect the relationship between them and their livelihood and what matters to them.
So how do we create a relationship between somebody who lives in Dandora and Dandora, even if they're going to be in Kilimani in 2 years? How do we create that partnership?
Initially, how we used to do it, that we always talk down on people.
Yeah.
And we're trying to tell them, you know, like it's never from a place of actually your health. So you go into the kwa dispensary kununua dawa. It all depends on this, how you handle your waste, for example. Or basically, if we connect it to that day to day, that's how we're going to make this happen. Yeah. And for example, we do it through Takabank. We're trying to say that e-plastic can be converted into something of value. Can be converted into a unga. It can be converted into livelihood for your children. Mm-hmm. So that, and if you collect it a certain way, like in Dandora when we're doing the Takabank challenge, if you come with a certain number of plastics, we give you unga in return. And they start seeing value. In a place in Dandora, you couldn't even see plastic or any other kind of need. So we have to always connect.
I like that. Thank you very much. I see Emily has joined us. Emily, as you prepare, I'm going to come to you with a question about a short video we've watched. But before I get to you, I'm going to ask Ms. Arnolda to explain to me, knowing that water is going to be the next thing we fight over as the largest needed resource on the planet, what's EABL doing about water and its availability?
So I think for KBL, water is very key in our business. We use a lot of water to produce some of the brands and the brands people enjoy. And we're very conscious of our responsibility to protect the water harvest, to protect that source, to ensure that as a business we will be sustainable. But then more importantly, just to ensure that we're not just taking away from the environment, we're not leaving enough resources for our children or our children's children. So we've done a lot of work protecting water towers, Aberdares, Mount Kenya, Mount Elgon. We do a lot of tree planting. I think, in the last decade we've done about 1 million trees, planted 1 million seedlings, so that 85%
success rate. But I think most importantly now is that ingraining. So what we've done as a business is we've cascaded sustainability to every function. So it's not just the corporate relations team that are, and I like what you said, Iman, about individual ownership. So whereas before it used to be seen as it's an elder's job to drive sustainability. So I'm in marketing, I don't really, have anything to do with it. But once we cascade it across the business, so marketing when they're branding, for example, Tusker, right? They're now conscious to inform you, and I think we discussed this earlier, inform you that Tusker is made with recycled water, for example. Just an example, And so then, picking up from what Juliani mentioned, when you look at now marketing again, we're doing events, right? And so now marketing, having cascaded sustainability, we did Oktoberfest, huge event last year, and we were very intentional about including waste management into the event. So same thing we've been discussing. So when our consumers are coming to an amazing event to enjoy great music, but they're seeing intentional efforts around recycling. So we had a partner, Taka Solutions, who were working with us. So now you're coming to an event as a concert goer, but then you're actually encouraged to, when you finish your beverage or your plastic cup, to put it to recycle it.
Yes.
And then now, picking back on water, I think so in the factory we have invested in a water recovery plant that will save us about 1.2 billion cubic liters of water a year. We are, working to make sure that we replenish all the water that we use in our operations goes back. So we're intentional about that. But the key thing is it can't just be the guys in the factory who are thinking about saving water. It is their whole business has to be united.
The whole supply chain. So I tend to carry and say, Fernando has spoken about what Bidco is doing, and we've heard the movement that they're making in plastics. We've also had another speak about ABL and their drive, and now about Coca-Cola and what they're working to do. Is this giving you confidence? Do you see gaps? And how do you feel about this new turn? Or is there no new turn, in your opinion?
No, there definitely is, because we have to be all very hopeful and positive, otherwise nothing will happen and nothing will change. So you can't do that with a negative spirit. But there is a big need for bringing all responsibilities again together. We need also the government. I agree completely with Vimal Shah that it's what we do, not only what we do, it's also how it's going to be facilitated, and that we need to do collectively. So for instance, in plastics, you can say, okay, don't throw it in the environment, but if we don't have dustbins, or we don't have a sorting at source, or we don't have proper waste management companies, then where does that leave the end consumer, and how do they know? So there's still a long way to go, because what Emily also addresses is not just don't pollute the environment, it's also and there I see a huge opportunity in the circular economy approach, where you rethink first what we are doing and how we're using resources. Is it really necessary to use that specific material for this purpose? Is it necessary, or is it the way we use it for that purpose? Can we expand the lifespan of the materials we're using? And if not, is there an alternative? Can we have an alternative? So you say rethink, actually redesign, because a lot of what we are now, and luckily in Kenya, we're really getting our head around, and also around policies and extended producer responsibilities, for instance, where we say, okay, we can't just recycle, it's how is the material being made, where do they end up, where have they been used. So you really have to think through what we are, how we're using products, and then you can say, okay, rethink, redesign, refuse maybe, reduce. If you can extend the lifespan, you reduce the use, and ultimately on the end you say recycle, because a lot of, there are recyclable materials like steel, glass, cement, which actually are recyclable and recyclable and recyclable over and over again. But not all materials will keep the same quality of the materials. So we have to have a look at that. And therefore, improving on PET quality, for instance, for the bottles of Coca-Cola, will allow us to recycle it a couple of times back into food grade quality. And there are opportunities. But again, we need to really rethink, we need to redesign, and then we need to have a system around it that if we say, okay, ultimately we're going to choose to use this, and we can only recycle it, that the quality is high enough, that the system of collection is in place, and all those kind of things. And I think the hope I have is that we're capable. If we want, like what East African Brewery is doing as well, wastewater treatment, we can do it as a choice. Costs money initially, and that's where the money problem always comes in, because that's the value. We value everything with money, everything. And sometimes we shouldn't. Sometimes we should say, we shouldn't care that this reflects it's no money. We need to have an ecosystem where some parts are reflected in value in money and others aren't, but collectively it works as a thriving ecosystem. And I think the circular economy can come in really handy, and it can replace jobs that we then make obsolete.
I don't want to talk about circular economy yet.
Okay.
But that's something we're going to talk about just now. But now I want to come to you, Isaac. And you wear two hats. You're the board chair of WWF, so you obviously see the impact of the work. But also you are the chairman of NCBA, which is a huge financial institution. And then you, as Karen has mentioned, see the impact that finances have been hit by COVID. And now they're still trying to push for more incentive for companies to do world-friendly things. And there's a report that came out, that the Living Planet Report, LPR 2020, it's a publication. We did 8 million tons of plastic are leaking into our oceans every year. Now, I just want to mention this. This is before COVID. And during COVID, we are all wearing masks. There are gloves. There's PPE. There's sanitizers come in small plastic bottles, medium-sized plastic bottles, huge plastic bottles. And all these things have been disposed of because everyone is afraid that they have infection rates or something. How now can we even begin, listening to what our panelists have mentioned, can we begin to look at this rationally, but also financially responsibly, and see a long-term plan? What do you think?
I think it's an interesting perspective, and I think I'd like to start looking at this from a point Dima raised first of all, around individual responsibility, even before I come back to answer your question. Individual responsibility, because everything starts with ourselves. Because if you choose to dispose, and you dispose in an irresponsible manner, it then creates a problem downstream for somebody else. Will come back to bite us. So as a principal requirement now for all our lending, there is an environmental assessment which we undertake for every business. One, there's a legal defined process in terms of the standards you have to meet. And we want to make sure that you meet those standards, and then there are broader needs which we have defined, which we want to ensure that you meet. So if you are polluting as a matter of course, it is very, very unlikely that we will lend to you.
So Manu Chagaya chat. He said, many years back I chaired the committee of WWF of Corporate Club. We planted 30 acres of plantation in Mount Forest. It was coming out well. On a beautiful morning, the representative of WWF and I went to a place to see how things were going on, and to their surprise, livelihoods, industry can afford to borrow money because they have a long-term plan. Your debt portfolio is 30 years, 50 years long, because you can do that. As an individual, my debt portfolio is 6 months, sometimes 2 months, depending on if I'm using insurance. It's very small, and I'm trying to figure out how to feed myself this month. Do these 2 stories.
Kuna disconnect. It's the same. Mkurugenzi anasema kuhusu wakigrow up kulikuwa na do not litter.
Yes.
Ndio.
Yes.
So ukienda kwa government institution kuna no corruption allowed. Unaona imeandikwa pale kubwa. But does it mean there is still corruption? Ndio.
Yes.
So I feel like until Mkurugenzi Vimal and Anolda waseme we have to look into all through our value chain.
Yes.
Unaona? So from production kwa huo farmer huko to by the time consumer meipata and even after using it.
Yes.
And then now they don't reduce it to CSR. Because iko reduced to every kwanza sasa ndio hii imeanza sasa November hapa utaona mapicha zinapigwa. Unaona like everybody's trying to do something for the orphans, everybody's trying to do that, but actually your business has solved a problem by using Bidco product means that mboga yangu itakuwa tamu kidogo extra. So you've solved my problem, but you need to look at the ripple effect of that, which of course is keen. You've been doing it hata tu nikusifu kidogo, but we have to connect the throughout the value chain, because we always leave it at a certain point. So it doesn't reflect your facility 50 years. Your debt portfolio. Unaona, I make sense kabisa to me, unaona, because as
it's about now, trying to figure out the now.
Exactly.
Emily, over there, I'm going to ask you, there are more cokes drunk every day than there are people brushing teeth. I read that somewhere. I'm not sure when or what that is.
No good news.
But Emily, knowing that Coca-Cola has been able to go everywhere, and there's a lot of people who use them, cans and bottles, that's actually most of what you do. What do you do to educate these people who use your products while at the same time taking care of their lives?
I think there's a lot of work we've done over the years, and again, this is not singularly just as Coca-Cola, but together with the industry. But I'll speak a little bit about what we've done ourselves. So, you have to start from somewhere, and of course we had to do a lot of research to first of all fundamentally understand where the challenges around understanding what recycling were. And it was really shocking that even the most educated, the most exposed people did not understand how to separate waste, or people did not even understand that people were ignorant to how they were disposing of their waste. So, and then of course, we all know that reaching out to schools is one of the easiest ways to begin, because they are organized, they have an environmental club, there's a system in place to keep this off. So what we did is just ran three campaigns at the same time. And I remember what we did in 2019 until the beginning of this year, pre-pandemic, was we rolled out a campaign called Recycle and Win with Coca-Cola, which was a very successful initiative that we ran in 2,000 schools in Kenya. And it was simply the school that managed to mobilize students aggressively enough to collect the most waste was going to win a football pitch. The other thing we managed to do was run radio campaigns, TV campaigns. I don't know if you can recall this. It was quite a busy period around November, December of last year up until February this year. And we managed to get a lot of feedback, a lot of people calling in and providing feedback on how we can, improve, or what they liked or did not like about what was happening. We've also worked a lot with the various stakeholders. We hold a lot of workshops across the country, just educating, whether it's leaders in various industries, people in waste management, and even including working with local government, just to at least get to a place where we're all able to come together and put in place the right waste management platforms and equipment that is required to move this thing forward.
As we wait for that to happen, do you work with farmers directly in supporting places like the Mao and water collection areas in this country, so that it's more than just what happens after the product has been created, but also what happens before the product comes to the business?
So in the business, we have a program which we call Growing Value Together, and that's created around the shared value. So for us, and I think just to answer to respond to the comment that Manian Chandari had made about the MAU. When we do our internal tree planting activities, we work with community forest associations, and that's just to piggyback from the point you're making, because it's that ownership, right? Because by the time we take our whole team, we go and we plant some trees. When we leave, it is the ownership of the CFAs, the community forest associations, who will ensure that they grow and nurture the trees, so that we try to avoid a situation where you come back in 5 years and the land is gone, because then they see trees as an income generating activity. So trees become valuable. Now, when you look at across the value chain, I think I had mentioned earlier about how we've cascaded sustainability in the business across the value chain, but this is also outside of the business. So we're moving to a point where we'll be asking our suppliers to do more. So for you to do business with EABL is no longer going to be dependent on what you can offer, but also we're going to be asking a lot more of you. So we as a business are committed to sustainability. For example, we're planting trees. You cannot be a supplier if you are not sharing the vision that we share. So for example, we have a network of 50,000 farmers. When we recruit every year, when the farmers sign contracts with us, we are moving to a situation. I think this was the first. So this last few months, when we started our new financial year, we actually had a cohort of farmers committing in their contracts. So this clause was included in the contracts, where the farmers were committing to plant trees. So when I talk about sustainability,
When they say committing to plant trees, did you give them money for seedlings? Or did they just commit and then you just have faith?
As you're executing your activities, right? We want you to be cognizant of the fact that we need you to be planting trees. So when we move away from the farmers, 50,000 of them, we're moving to a position where, so legally, our legal teams are now understanding their role to require our suppliers to do more. We have distributors across the country, and what we've done is we've mapped out all their carbon emission, and we've also mapped out how many trees they need to plant to offset. So again, these are all things that we're identifying. How much carbon are you emitting? How many trees do you need to plant? And then we're moving to a point where we're saying, listen, these are your numbers. So as part of, you're a key partner to KBL, you're a distributor, but you need to ensure that you plant 10,000 trees to offset your carbon emissions. So there's
This is something you're building into your contracts and engagements?
That is the plan, yes. So you see, first of all, we have to identify, which is what we've done. So we've mapped out all the carbon emissions and how many trees they need to offset.
I'll come back to Julian again, because I always want you to tell me how things are on the ground. Because we can write policy well. I find Kenyans are really good at policy writing. When it comes to implementation of things, it doesn't look right.
Yeah.
That's good.
But you see, if it's in a clause, as a distributor, you have a contract with the business.
So you have a contractual requirement to do it.
Yes.
Come back to Juma. Coca-Cola and KBL's number one competition is tea. That's what they're essentially trying to replace. They're not going to say that. I don't work with them, but that's my thought. And tea is drunk with ugali and spinach and meat, and Bidco provides the oil to make that. So you are essentially an essential service to many families that rely on Bidco to eat. But at the same time, you provide the products in plastic. You have been here generational, and I'm sure you've seen a 50, 70 year, 100 year plan for the company to still be here. Talk to us about the strategic leadership decisions you're making, so that whoever comes after you and who comes after that person is thinking about the grandchildren of all of us here and the products that we're using in their homes and how those impact and affect our society and environment.
Thank you very much. I think that's an important question. First and foremost, we've studied the entire value chain and seeing what are the alternatives, what we've got, what we do right now, and how we package it. A long time ago, all these oils were available in tins, right? And then tins were all over. And then came plastics, and plastics became the panacea in terms of saying, wow, that solves all the problems because it's reusable, it's recyclable, plus it's hygienic, and it doesn't break often. So it doesn't rust also and doesn't have a problem there. So that's an issue. I think when it was initial phases, it was being reused by people automatically for water. And you could see a lot of water people reusing it for water and all that stuff. These are the rigid containers. And when you look at that, you could see a huge recycling market. Even if you go to the markets, you'll see there are a lot of used oil containers, yellow, being sold, taken up country for water, until we all get piped water. I think that's one thing. But at the same time, we looked at that recycling, and there's a whole lot of, about 7 or 8 industries now, collecting these and recycling them already, okay, and making them into new products. Not used back for edible, but for used for water or for anything else. So there's a whole recycling industry around it. However, the problem we have in Kenya is if Giuliani was going to put up an industry just to recycle, the banks in Kenya will not fund that at all. They don't fund it because it's not got a business plan, it doesn't have a customer at the end. It's again based on will you be able to collect or not. And that's where there's a whole risk profiling that happens here. So there is no lending there. Now if that goes back to DFIs or to the financial institutions and says it's a developmental function, the DFIs have also become now more of commercial banks. And there's no real development funding available for anyone. And that's where we need to have this new effort to say, if recycling was to be done, even we are part of Petco. Coca-Cola, Emily knows about this. Petco is part of the PET recycling and we're all part of it. The point is, there are many industries who want to put up new recycling plants, but they can't get funding. So going sort of on a development project where, let's say Giuliani wants to put up a recycling plant for PET and start doing that, they'll say, look, where's your customer, where's your supply? And you've got to get all this sourcing from the market. What if you fail? It's very risky. And that risk profiling is a big problem. So again, in a COVID time right now, industries are being hit very badly. Why? Our competitiveness is being eroded. If you look at the alternatives to whatever you package now, what do you package it in? Even the masks that we wear, could we wear glass masks? Right? Could we wear metal masks? No. You got them in plastics. We had to use them, right? And they're better and cheaper. Same thing with all that we're using right now, the PPEs.
It's almost as if we're stuck in this plastic space. It sounds like we're stuck in this plastic space.
Yes, but plastic is not a bad thing. The question is how we dispose of it.
Not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. This whole thing about saying plastic means devil is wrong. And I think you got to look at it from a perspective, can it be recycled or not? And can we have recycling done in a sustainable manner, in a responsible manner where it is brought in, sorted at home, put it in, and recycle it, right? And that's very much possible.
So there's a second question about thinking forward and how we do this. But then, Karen, let me now bring back the circular economy conversation you had started, and now take all these points. Emily has mentioned what she's doing in schools and 2,000 schools, a school on a football field, fabulous. And Giuliani has talked about. In fact, Giuliani is the starting point. He's talked about where can a local be able to find revenue from it. And Lola's talked about planting cheese as a requirement. Well, am I planting cheese to make you happy, or am I planting cheese because I see the value? You see what I mean? Then now, as well, we talked about the risk profile of Giuliani's trying to build up businesses. And as Bimala said, he stopped getting from his banks. How do we build a circular economy when the facts are not necessarily stacked up against you, but it's not easy either? How do we do it?
No, it's not easy at all, but it's exactly to bring all those elements together. And again, I keep on hammering on that. We need different values. We need a different system. And that you can't build with the current one. You can't do that. We have amazing, we have waste. Waste is not waste until we label it as waste. Waste is just in a wrong, it's a material in the wrong place. So if you have waste from sugarcane and you create briquettes out of it as an alternative for fossil fuel, how is it possible that we say that that's too expensive compared to a tree, while we have a ban on logging? So we have a tremendous issue in this country because we need to increase our forest coverage, and yet a briquette cannot compete with a tree. That boils down to value. And therefore, we really need to change the value sets. We can't always say it's too expensive. It's also what we're now saying, why would you not invest in the recycle plant? If this is our collective future, if that is going to solve an issue, why is that too expensive? Against what? Against the disaster we're going to face? Can you value that? Like, it is too expensive. Compared to what? Yes, what is that? So, and then I think we have to keep on thinking, yes, it's great if you can recycle it. Plastic is a great product. We're only using it for 60 years. Let us not tell ourselves that we can't change it, because it has been only there for 60 years. We were living without it. Yes, it has improved a lot of things. We are healthier, we can package hygienically, and all those kind of things. We can transport lighter, and so we reduce sometimes on carbon emission.
Yeah.
And yes, plastic is only a problem if you look at how we manage it.
Yes.
But not only how we manage it, it's also the choice for, do we really need it now?
Yeah.
Do we really need it for this product? Do we need it for that? And if so, is the quality high enough? Because again, not everything is recyclable. And also again, what is the choice of a consumer? What choices do I have? I mean, you can say it's my responsible to not litter, it's my responsible to recycle, but I didn't ask for pasta in a plastic packaging in the first place. I wanted broccoli, I want pasta. I didn't ask for the packaging around it. And that's a different mindset, and that needs to come from businesses as well. Businesses, like, let's face it, we're also people saying, oh, all the people in the textile and apparel industry are suffering big time because of COVID.
Yeah.
And people cannot get paid because H&M is not placing the orders. The question is also, if we want to solve that issue and have everyone in a job, does that implicate that we need to stick to fast fashion? Is that really what we need to do? But what does it require to change the whole system? I think to go back to East African breweries, you have to look at what you can do and what you can do in your value chain and where the impact is. I think procurement, because that's actually what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Procurement is super easy. Everyone should do it. You just impose your rules upon others, and then only then you can do business with them. So it's a great tool. It's a very powerful tool to just say, listen, suppliers, these are our core values, and we need everyone to comply. So I think it's great. Again, planting trees is one. Growing them, having indigenous, and you can grow them in the Mau forest, but if people can't have food on the table by the end of the day in that area, you will never manage it. You have to not plant trees. You have to build a thriving ecosystem in the Mau forest. Probably, if you want to grow trees in Mau forest, you have to actually provide jobs on the other hand. You have to start building schools on the right, and you have to make sure that there's no human nature conflict at that space. So again, and I just want to highlight something else. If you think about system change, and I'm talking about values, why is it that we don't have, for instance, like water use? In Kenya, we lose a lot of water also just through leaking pipes and all that, and just spilling water. Because once you have access to it, it doesn't really have a value.
Yeah.
Why are there not credits? Why do I not have credits for so many liters of water? Vimal has the same. I'm just saying that.
Kind of like carbon credits, you mean?
No, you have so much credits for this. You have everyone is entitled to have this much water, this much electricity, even Wi-Fi. Why is it a privilege to be on Wi-Fi, and yet it's providing us jobs, and people can't go online? They don't have work. So why not make a few essentials accessible? If I don't need my credits for my water, I don't use them. Then I have them left. I won't waste them. I will trade them. I will give them to Vimal because he needs them for his factory. Yeah. I will give them to East African breweries. So we can make a choice of how much do we need and what does that take from the complete society.
Yeah.
So can we create different value sets?
Thank you for that. Mr. Wondu, I like that you wear two hats because it becomes tough to answer the question with one perspective. Because now you have to look at what Mama said about debt, and you will not give a recycling company 250 million shillings to build it out because it's good for the environment. It doesn't work that way. Whereas Bidco, Coca-Cola, and ABL, though they may say plant trees, it is not part of their core business. That there are more trees in the world. They still have to do their bottom line. And now, as Karen said, that circular economy is required for this to renew water. Germany, you've seen in the course of this last week, 2030, if you're selling a car that's pure diesel, they're not going to allow you to do it. I think the UK wants to do the same thing. Companies that are working on, in fact, it was, I believe, Monday when Kenya Power put out the front page news story and they said people are doing solar. And they were complaining that on social media, everyone is moving to solar. My parents and I are one of those because it's inconsistent, it cannot be relied upon, and all these other things. So my question to you now, based on what you heard, knowing that first, it's not necessarily profitable to help the planet, necessarily, when it comes to investment especially. But second, the more, which is 1964, we were 4.5 million Kenyans. Now we're 47 million. BIDCO had 10 customers in 1963 based on those numbers. Now they have 10 million customers. So how do we build a society, both as a financier, but also as WWF, that creates environments to support a circular economy based on those traits you've had? It's a tough question. Keep taking time. It's tough.
Interesting. No, I'm actually not stressed out because I think I want to start with what I consider the easy one. I think that perhaps the notion should be that financiers are not there to give money, but to support business and to support industry. Once they understand what the business is doing and how it is doing it, with all the consequences that business has in the ecosystem we operate in. So I don't agree with Vimal's comment that banks don't finance recycling and things like that, because they do. They probably set some very, very different. They probably set some. They probably set some very, very different benchmarks for those. That's one. Two, either haven't invested in sufficiently understanding the supply chain to ensure that the outcome at the end of it is one which will ensure if they lend, the money will be paid back.
Yes.
So that's a principle, and that principle doesn't change in whether you are talking about recycling or you are talking about Vimal setting up a factory to produce products for the consumer. The principles are the same. The principles are the same.
Okay.
So the question is, what's the level of understanding? How is the risk assessed? And how are the outcomes basically assessed? That's the principle of all financing. And otherwise, the scrap metal market is fully financed by the commercial banking center. I know, because we finance at least 4 of them. From an NCBA perspective, which feeds into the steel industry. So it's a question of understanding. So that's, I think, the financing side is one issue. I think if we then
seen that in the recycling space, or is it that?
I think it's probably nascent. Requires to be better understood. But I believe that it is going to be dealt with once all the information is put together in a rational manner. Because if you think of the recycling industry, it is very, very, if I look at it in terms of first of all, starts with the home. The distribution, the separation point, then the collection point, then where does it actually end up? And those are the things which anybody who's financing that type of business would need to understand.
So tell me now about the WWF angle.
I think if I come back to the WWF angle, it's really, for me, I think the critical issue is to look at the partnership frameworks which are there in place, and the power of one, organizations like KEPSA, and two, industries to come together to basically appreciate that the world we live in today requires an investment in our thinking and in our time, and also some financial element on a partnership framework which allows us to begin solving the problems which we see day to day. I think the expectation that government will solve them for me is, I see as a very, very big challenge if we are expecting the government to solve them on their own. And so partnerships which allow us to work together, to change our approach. One, I think Giuliani talked earlier about it's November. We are going to begin seeing a lot of activities which are social in nature to support the less fortunate and all that. And I think my view is we need to move away from that social responsibility type thing, or charity type thing, into sustainable social responsibility, in which we are actually we are making investments in things which can grow legs and actually become useful to broader society. I mean, I want to pick up a point which
nobody can hear.
I had to pick up a point Arnold made around protecting the rainforest as an example, because reliance on water, if you look at rain patterns in this country, they've changed quite considerably. There are a couple of water towers in this country which need to be protected. If we don't do anything about it, My question would be, for both breweries and Coca-Cola, where do you think the water they need to produce a product they produce is going to come from?
Not to mention that the people have to choose
exactly,
Coke
and exactly. So it will come to a point where we will all be fighting over water, and everything else will be very irrelevant.
That's the new big resource.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so as we come towards, as we're winding up, and I'm hoping our technical team is taking care of the hearing, there's two people I want to add to this conversation very briefly, and yes, Stephen, I have a question for you. But there's Elizabeth Waluti. She's a young environmentalist and climate activist, founder of Green Generation Initiative and head of campaigns at Daima Coalition for Green Spaces at the Wangari Maathai Foundation.
Thank you so much. So it's a question that comes through a contribution. So when I was watching that film, at some point I felt so much hope seeing the plants and animal species around, but it kept me thinking what will happen, because at the end of the day, we may soon lose all the species of plants and animals. And the big question is, who is going to end up bearing the burden of having these species lost? And I know that we've talked a lot about millions of people depending on our natural resources for survival, but still those resources remain under risk due to human activities. So it clearly shows that if we continue with business as usual, our planet is going to get to a point where it can no longer support life. And of course, it's a challenge to us all, it's a challenge to everyone. And the good thing is that we have shifted the conversation from blaming to talking together to discuss what can we do what can we do to challenge what we're doing right now, and what can we do to change the situation. So it's clear that we need to focus a lot more on where we are placing our money. And I think there has been a lot of conversations about pulling investments out of fossil fuels. And the question goes to, how can we now ensure that we also pull investments out of every activity that is fueling biodiversity loss, and out of every activity that is also fueling deforestation? Because we have also mentioned about risks, and while every action involves risk, it's more riskier to refuse to act. So I think we need to discuss and figure out how can we transform our businesses to make investing in nature the new norm. So I would love to maybe get a feedback on that question. How can we make investing in nature the new norm in our businesses?
Overall, Yannick, can you check it? First of all, you said earlier that is, you mentioned that it is not profitable to help the planet. Sindio, that's how it seems. Sindio, for me, I think we just need a mind shift. In what is value in nini. Because like for me, especially now, when let me give you an example. So in my house, I separate my plastics. I put the plastics candle, I put the papers candle, and I put organic whatever candle. So hizi organic naeza nifanya nao farming kidogo kwa hao, unaona. And in wider space as an artist, most of the companies that we're trying to reach out to, we tell them, we actually refuse some gigs simply because by saying, oh, do our values around this climate change, or do our values around this is Naingiana? And if you get me to perform, you at the same time have to allow the Taka banks and the youth groups, because we are providing employment for young people, and they're seeing value in being part of the value chain. So I think we need to have a mind shift of what is value in the first place.
So let me ask you that. What is that? You divide your garbage. I wonder how many other people here do the same thing in their houses. What gave you that incent?
We have to come from a place of, I have to agree that I come from a place of leadership, and I can't, because we always say, oh, we need individual responsibility, but I think individual responsibility comes from a place of, people come from a little bit from privilege. So Vimal is from a place of privilege, Nasium from a place of privilege kuniliko. So whatever Vimal does, when it comes to how he does his business, the way he even wears his tie or not, it triggers somehow. It's a place of leadership from my point of view. So sometimes we do things not because it makes us cool to do it, or because whatever, it's because it's come with responsibility. Whoever much is given, much is expected.
Yeah, I know. Just keep going.
Yep, I think I agree with him, and I'd like to just go back to a point you made earlier. 2 points. The first one being about whether it's profitable for businesses. I think it is, because if I give you an example of Kenya Brews, we announced recently a 22 billion shilling investment in renewable energy across 3 sites in Kenya and Uganda. Now, that will reduce our carbon emission by 42,000. It will create 900 direct and indirect jobs, and then we'll be able to use solar to provide a tenth of our power needs. So if you just take the solar angle on its own, it will be profitable for us as a business because that the solar power, right, will reduce our bills. Right. I think already we have we're very focused on energy efficiencies, and we are actively reducing our bills to KPLC to a point where, and I like, Karen, when you mentioned about briquettes, because as we are thinking about biomass and moving to biomass in this investment, right, we'll be creating a whole value chain of, I almost want to call it an army of people that will supply the raw material that we need to fuel our biomass boilers. So yes, it can be profitable. And I think going back to what Juliani said about, it doesn't always have to be an incentive, but as businesses, as Kenya Breweries, as Coca-Cola, we are influential. So despite the fact that I might require my farmer in a contract, or might require him to plant a tree, but that is my responsibility. That is how I influence more people, because I'm at a point where I know what it means to do good and to save the planet. So if I can make my distributors join me, that will mean our planet will be at a much better place because we're reducing our carbon emission. And I think it's just, if one person can, even from this room, if one person can go home and decide to do like Juliani and separate their waste, that is one more person, going back to what Vimal said about individual. And that's what we need. Influence is a big thing.
Okay. Isaac, I just want to keep going on with you.
No, I think that probably just to add on to some of the issues which have been raised. For me, I think the critical issue is a very major change in mindset. And I think to recognize that, and this is how I started this conversation this morning, is that it's about us as human beings to basically realize that either we are in control of the environment we are in, or we are not. If we are not in control of it, then we will destroy everything in it with ourselves as part of it. If we are in control of it, we will begin bending the curve and begin allowing the world to survive beyond perhaps the next couple of millions of years.
I agree. I mean, it's upon us, so it's us who need to change it. And I think also, not in terms of incentive, but I think we are the next to be extinct. Might not be the elephant, might be us, because we think we're a very special species. But you have seen COVID. Imagine this one being more deadly or more vicious. It's just about how successful a species is, and success is about adaptation to your context. The why are we still here and the dinosaurs not? We had climate change millions of years ago as well. It was not caused by us. Now we are instrumental in what happens to evolution. We are changing evolution. It's us. So I think the sixth extinction might be us. We think it's not, but this virus is quite successful. It's controlling us. Imagine a slightly different one, and that is called success. In evolution, that's called success. That's the ones that survive and adapt and take over. And so I think that might be enough incentive to think, let's live in harmony with nature, so nature can take care of us with the elephants and with wildlife in it. I think Richard Leakey would always say, like, the rules of conservation apply as much to us as to wildlife. Yeah. So I think that should be an encouragement and a warning, and we have seen it now. We got a warning. But the next virus might be more successful. And so we need to adapt. And the adaptation is in mitigation, those things that don't work, actually. We need to mitigate and we need to close those gaps. And we're able to do it. But it's what you say, it's between the two ears, and it's about our thoughts towards it. I think ultimately we need to change a collective consciousness. we are now, this is our reality, and we think that that is what it is. It's factual.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's not.
We've done this industrialization. It came across 300 years ago, 200 years ago. We've just started really manifesting it. So it's our current belief system. It's our current collective consciousness. But we can change that. And we can change and choose to change that every day.
Wow. Emily White, I'll be coming to you shortly, and Nancy Lebega, I'll be coming to you as well. But Rima, thoughts on what I've just been said? What is your opinion on this? Knowing that Donald Trump denied climate change.
I think there's something called the reality, the truth. The truth remains the truth. We can put many perspectives to it. I think this just needs to become a mass movement, right? What everybody has said today is mindset change. Yes, it means I, as an individual on this planet, take this as my planet and my responsibility. The minute we do that, we're all sorted, because then you start saying, I take responsibility for not polluting, I take responsibility for this and that. Plus, I think this law of economics will need to change. Because when you look at what bankers look at it from perspective of the risk perspective, everybody looks at anything environment as a risk, right? And we talked about natural resources. I think we want to convert that to say natural capital. Rather than looking at it as resource. Resource means I go and exploit the resource, take it and make money from it. So take the entire timber industry, this, that, whatnot, and they're all doing that, okay? We're moving everything to paper now. Now paper is very environment friendly, I agree. But look at it. How many people are planting those trees? It's not. And therefore, when we talk about converting to something else, you have a problem. Water, and I put it to you, water, there is no shortage of water in this world. There is so much water. Look at all the oceans, right? All that ocean that we've got is increasing. The melting happening in the North and South Pole. When you look at that, water's there. We just put in desalination plants. You put them across the coast, you have enough water, potable water, to supply the whole of Kenya. Do we have that as a big mission? Will a bank finance it? Will the government say, yes, let's do that and let's pump water up country and everybody has enough water? These are the projects that are required. Not the, when it's a very sexy thing like political, we go and say, let's spend more money on a referendum, this, that, whatnot. On these sort of things, nobody wants to touch it. What's happening in solar? I think KPLC is fighting against solar right now because it's going to destroy them. And solar is the only solution. If you're moving to solar, why are you doing it? Because the costs have come down. The cost of your power will be 3 US cents per kilowatt hour. We're being charged 18 cents by KPLC. So you're going to make sense out of it. Because it makes money, you're moving there. 10 years ago, we moved from all hydrocarbons to biomass. And all our boilers across the country, across East Africa, are all biomass today, right? Yes, and we take any agro waste that we get. Today, there's shortage of agro waste. There's not enough coffee husks, there's not enough macadamia nuts, there's not enough agro waste available. So what happens? Go back to wood chips. And that's the only solution that happens, right?
Wood chips is forest.
I'm just saying that's where it goes back to. So again, agroforestry and all that stuff needs to become more, like Karen was saying, sustainable agroforestry, where people see it, I grow it for 10 years, I cut it, I get another tree, I replant, and that becomes a business, right? So that's what I'm saying. There's a mass movement required here to say, can we make it better? Again, grazing. I think if you see our planet, you see actually grazing is what's destroying our ecosystem. So instead of grazing, let's do zero grazing. We do animal feeds, and we're doing a lot of that stuff right now. But people still want to go and say we're grazing. Why? Because it's cheaper. It's cheaper. So this requires, I think, it's a whole planet issue. We all take responsibility and we say, it's our responsibility, not yours and mine. And again, how you act when there's nobody in the room and it's dark and there's only a mirror there. That's important. Otherwise, we're all doing it for cosmetic purposes, just to show and look good. I think the looking good should go and say, fine, let's do it. A mass movement is possible. It's like the Wangari Maathai movement, right? And we can do that. It's not difficult to do. But it goes back to everybody's heart to say, I will not do this. I will not spoil it. If everybody keeps their front yard and backyard clean, the whole continent, the whole world will be clean.
Emily, I hope that you'll be hearing us.
Business cannot succeed in a failing society, period. And so businesses just have to take an active role in leading this transformation. And businesses that will take this on will ultimately be better placed to harness any emerging opportunities in the market. With the global challenges that we have today, whether it's climate change, whether it's water and food crisis, poverty, conflict, just name it, they are all in need of solutions, and the private sector can deliver these solutions, and these issues represent a large and growing market for business innovation. So we are very well positioned to improve our environment and communities. If we look just at some of the developing countries in the world, 84% of the GDP, just 84% of the GDP, and 90% of employment sometimes is driven by the private sector. So really, we have a very important role to play. And if there are companies that have not caught on to this and are not thinking about how they will embed environmental and social sustainability within their businesses, they're not going to be around in the next 50 years. And there is a growing body of evidence for indicating that sustainability factors influence financial returns, and they present an opportunity to drive long-term growth for whatever industry or business that you are in. Those are my 2 cents.
We cannot offer jobs on a dead planet, but importantly, that I think the private sector and the businesses are central in providing solutions. And we have seen this happen across the world. We've seen this in Kenya. I think one of the panelists talked about, sourcing sustainably. And if we demand to source sustainably, then those who supply are forced to actually do it sustainably because there is a market and it makes business sense. So I think that is what I am hearing. And as an organization, we feel this is not a task for any single person. The CEO of BITCO has said this. It is individual responsibility. It is, corporate. It is collective action that is needed. Because the people, and I say this with due respect to Juliani, and I think Elizabeth, who is also in the panel, are the ones that will live with the consequences of our actions today if we don't change what we need to change. Our businesses, Kenya as an economy is mainly nature dependent. And if therefore we draw all the capital that this nature is providing us, then we'll not be able to survive, whether it's jobs, with the businesses. And therefore I see, and listening to the panelists today, that, there is the commitment, and there are the actions that we want to do together because we cannot prosper, differently. The solutions will come from ourselves. The solutions will also come from the private sector. They'll drive this, even as we all join to see, a world that is different and is more sustainable. Yeah, so I think this is what I carry from these conversations today.
I just want to ask, in closing, if Karen and Mr. Wondo would just say 3 words as to what do you feel in your heart is missing? And what do we need to do, except personal responsibility, to make this become a reality? Okay.
I think we need creativity, imagination, because if you imagine, you can create. And I think we need connection.
Fantastic.
To add on to Karen's points, we need to collaborate much, much more deliberately, as opposed to collaborating when we only must.
And thank you very much to everyone who has participated on Facebook, on YouTube, and our panelists on Zoom. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Nancy, for being there. We appreciate everyone who's coming to the Zoom call, and we know there's going to be videos out later if you want to look at this. But it was nice to be here, and I look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Great job.